Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Despite the background footage, this video is actually going to be quite different from any other video on my channel. Now, if you couldn't guess based on the one video of my channel of it, I am a fan of the Warriors series. And in today's video, I will attempt to answer the age-old question, who is the oldest cat in the series? Or was. Before we start, just a few things. One, this video will contain massive spoilers for pretty much the whole series. And two, it's been quite a while since I have read some of the books, so it's possible I might misremember something. And lastly, if you just want the answer without watching the whole thing, just skip to the timestamp on screen. Anyways, let's get into it. So, initially there were 8 characters that came to mind. Misty Star, Barley, Purdy, Barkface, Stoneteller, Mosspelt, Cloud with Storm and Belly, and Cloudberry. The first 3 are hopefully pretty obvious as to why they're on this list, especially the first one. But I will explain, why I thought everyone had a chance to be the oldest cat in the series once we get to them. And you're probably wondering, why don't we just Google it? But the thing is, Google is outdated. And even if I put, ever in the Google search, the same answer pops up. But this does get one thing out of the way, which is Misty Star's age, except that the age listed is approximate, not exact. Luckily, it is easy to figure out Misty Star's exact age because there's been a book taking place for pretty much her entire life. So using the Warriors timeline, which I will be referring to a lot in this video, sorry that I can't remember every single detail ever, we can see that she was born in the Leaf Bear of 3 years before Firestar came to the forest, and died in the Leaf Fall of 13 years after he came to the forest, which would make her about 15 3/4 years, or 189 moons old when she died. There's also Mosspelt, who's a current River Clan elder, that I thought was the same age, if not older than Misty Star, but she's actually just about 13 years old according to her wiki page. And her birth isn't listed on the timeline, so I'll just have to go with it. Next up, we have Barkface. I actually did think he had a very big chance of being the oldest cat because he's older than, even Tall Star and only dies in the beginning of Omen of the Stars. But his wiki page says he died at 153 moons, or 12.75 years old, which strangely enough is not actually backed up by the timeline. He was born towards the end of 8 years before Firestar came to the forest, and dies about halfway into year 7, which would make him actually about a full year older than that, or 13.75 years, or 165 moons old at death. And then we have Barley, who we know was a fully grown cat when Firestar and Greystripe were apprentices going to the Moonstone, and that he is alive as of Greenleaf year 13, thanks to Greystripe's vow. And his birth is not listed on the timeline, and his age isn't on his wiki page, so we will have to do some guessing. And we know that when they visit the Moonstone and Into the Wild, Blue Star already knows who he is, so he would have had to have been there for some time. So I'm gonna, for the sake of simplicity, we know he also, grew up in Blood Clan, so for the sake of simplicity, I'm gonna go with, a round-ish number and say he's about a year and a half old when they first meet him, which would put him at being born at the beginning of 1 year before Firestar, and living until now, which as of June 2022 is about 3/4 of the way into year 13, making Barley about the same age as Barkface, but because this does rely on guessing, he's just going to be approximately that age. And then next, we have someone who is actually a lot younger than I thought she was, which is Cloudberry. I originally assumed she was pretty old because she was a medicine cat when Mapleshade was alive, who then lived until about the same time Doestar died in Goosefeather's Curse. And despite it not being on the timeline, we know that she replaced Ravenwing in the Leaf Fall of 19 years before Firestar, and that she dies in New Leaf of 9 years before Firestar, meaning she was ThunderClan's medicine cat for about 9.5 years, or 115 moons. And she would have had to have been old enough to be a fully trained medicine cat, but, still young enough to where her mentor was alive, and also young enough to where she could have lived that long. So I'm, again, going to guess and say that she's about 2 years old, which means she was about 11.5 or 138 moons old when she died. And then we get to Purdy, who, I confess, I have no idea how old he is and have no good way of figuring it out, because he was a loner slash kitty pet for most of his life. And the reason why he is in this video is because, if I'm remembering correctly, he is described as an elderly cat when he's first introduced in Midnight, but he still then lives until Shattered Sky. And he's first met, which means he's first met towards the end of year 4, and he dies roughly halfway through year 11, which means he lived for about 6 3/4 years, or 81 moons, after he was first introduced. And according to a veterinarian website, cats are considered senior at 7 to 10 years old, meaning Purdy was most likely anywhere from 13.5 to 17 when he died, once we add those numbers together. But if we just average 7 and 10 together, and then which is 8.5, and then we add that to 6.75, we get 15.25, or 15.25, which is 183 moons old when he died, which, for the sake of simplicity, will be the number that we're just going to say how old he is for now. Which leaves us with our last two Warriorcats, who aren't even warriors, and unless you know your Warriors trivia, you probably don't know why they're in this, which is the reason why Stoneteller was supposedly 20 years old when he died, and Cloud with Storm and Belly was his mother, who died not very long before him. The problem is, the only sources I could find for this were not super reliable, but there isn't really anything to contradict it, so no reason to not go with it, I guess. But the question is the time gap between Cloud and Stoneteller's deaths less or greater than how old Cloud was when she had Stoneteller? Looking at the timeline, we can see that Stoneteller dies about a year after Cloud is last seen alive, despite neither of their deaths actually being on the timeline. And especially considering that she doesn't even die in Outcast, we don't even have to do the math, really, to figure out that Cloud would have had to have been older than Stoneteller when he died, when she died. Which would mean that Cloud with Storm and Belly is the oldest cat in the Warriors series, at somewhere older than 20 years or 240 moons old when she died. However, if you don't want to go with her because the whole Stoneteller being 20 years old thing is pretty uncertain, then to pretty much no one's surprise, Misty Star would be the oldest cat ever, although there is a chance that Purdy could have been older. There are a few honorable mentions that I thought of, which are Leaf Star, who did become leader only about a month after Bramble Star received his warrior name, but she was very young and likely just a month or two older than Bramble Star, who according to the wiki is about 11.5 years old. There's also Graystripe, who lived from Into the Wild until A Light in the Mist, but we already know that he's younger than multiple cats on the list. Well, we already know that he's for sure younger than Misty Star, so that's why he's not included. And then there is Rock, who's immortal, but saying he's the oldest cat would have just been way too easy. And of course, there obviously could have just been some irrelevant background character that could have lived for like 50 years, but I shouldn't even have to say that there's no way of knowing that. Now, I would also just like to say that I would also just like to explain how cat age works. That way you have a better understanding of how old these cats actually are. So basically, the first human year of their life is 16 cat years. The second human year is another 8, which takes them up to 24 years old. And every year from then on is 4 cat years, which means the only cats that lived, exceptionally long were Stoneteller and Cloud, making it to about 96 years old in cat years. One last thing, the background footage you see is me trying to make the lake territories from scratch in Survival Minecraft, so it is actually related to the video. Anyways, that's about all I have to say, so make sure to like and subscribe and all the stuff like that, and I'd be willing to make more videos like this, so long as they're not some super in-depth topic. So I guess just comment if you want me to make any more Warriors videos, and goodbye.